So in terms of integral, Ken Wilber and people inspired by him have been using one of his ideas, which is really not his idea. It's actually just common sense in many ways. But it's the archetype of the mandala, remember? You've got a spatialization of totality around a center, which in Wilber's hands he refers to as 4 quadrants. And these quadrants he is using actually basically Teilhard and Jung, or ideas. Teilhard, remember, makes a distinction between the without and the within of things. So for Teilhard, the cosmos, all of reality, you can look at it from at least 2 ways, either from the outside or from the inside. Now, Teilhard's great insight is that everything, including the plants that we see, atoms, molecules, everything that we normally see as from the outside has a within, an inside, or a consciousness dimension. So everything you can look at from the outside or from the inside. And Wilber adopts that. So there's the within and the without. And then from many thinkers, including Jung, he says that we can look at anything either as a kind of unitary phenomenon or as a collection, as a system of parts. In other words, individual or collective. Individual, collective. Let me make this bigger. So within, without, individual, collective. So this is the so-called 4 quadrants, Wilber's 4 quadrants. They're not Wilber's 4 quadrants, but it's an interesting combination of just 2 different oppositions, and you could come up with your own. I've been playing with all sorts of possibilities of mandalic polarities for many, many, many years, so you try it on your own sometime. Realizing that it's, in one sense, it's a map, it's not the territory, right? But some interesting things happen. So what is the totality we're talking about here? Well, remember the beginning quotation, planetization. We're talking about the planet. But the planet not just as a physical thing, but as having a within. Not just as a unitary entity, but as some sort of collection. So what would be the manifestations of the great turning from this kind of integral perspective? I ask myself. And just as something to play with, well, looking at the planet as an individual from without, as it were, scientifically, third person, we get, as an example, Gaia theory, which has emerged in our time. So it sees the planet as a single self-organizing organism, or superorganism. Okay? So the various earth sciences. Now, of course, the Gaia theory itself is embedded in what Brian calls the new story, right? The new story. So we have to remember that, but we can at least limit our gaze, if we're talking about the planet as a whole, seen as a unitary phenomenon from the outside. Gaia theory sort of does it, right? In our program, though, we're equally interested in the within of Gaia. You might say a different sort of sense of what Thomas might call the dream of the earth. So I asked myself, what is the dream of the earth? Not just in our moment, but what is the dreaming of the earth? And one answer is archetypal cosmology. Archetypal astrology, I should say. Yeah. Say the anima mundi, the soul of the world. The anima mundi. The soul of the world, for example, as we see it in archetypal astrology. It's not the only way we see it, but we do see it there. Namely, if you think of Gaia dreaming, and So what are the characters in Gaia's dreams? Well, you could say they are the Gaia's siblings, the planets and stars. Now, in archetypal astrology, of course, they're always as they appear from here. It's a geocentric astrology. And the neat thing about archetypal astrology is that the planets and the stars are not balls of rock, right? They are gods and goddesses. They're spirits, they're entities, they're archetypes, they're souls. Right? So, archetypal astrology is one way of getting to the anima mundi, which would be the within of Gaia as an individual. Maybe other ways, but that's one way. The within of the collective. So Gaia as a collective, but in a sense from without. I would point to the Earth Charter. Now, just to give you another way of understanding these quadrants, often, sometimes people talk about psychology as the primary discipline for this quadrant, culture for the lower left, society, and let's say sciences, physical sciences. Okay, this is another way of looking at the typical disciplinary spread through the quadrants. Psychology, culture, society, the sciences. Well, in terms of culture, for me, the most exciting and significant manifestation, from the perspective of Gaia as a whole, the planet as a whole, in the lower left quadrant, is the Earth Charter. If you don't know about the Earth Charter, I really encourage you to look it up. It's deeply inspiring. And Mary Evelyn Tucker, our dear friend of our program, had a very active role in the drafting of the Earth Charter and in the organization of that project. It is a set of principles and a framing of how humans ought to go about guiding their lives together in order to minimize the catastrophic effects of the Great Unraveling and to facilitate the optimal manifestation of the Great Turning. And it is already taken the form now of a kind of soft law, just like the International Agreement on Human Rights, that this should be the starting point for all individual constitutions and international relations and so on. Look at the Earth Charter. It's deeply inspiring. Okay? But of course, the Earth Charter needs to be enacted from the outside collectively as well. And for now, all we have is the UN. Very important. We don't know, what this would take. I'm calling it Earth Federation. And the way I like to think of Earth Federation is in contrast to my earlier science fiction mindset when I was very young, and when one of my main sort of religious preoccupations was space and Star Trek and 2001 and so on. Well, those of you who are familiar with Star Trek know that there's this beautiful, noble ideal of a united federation of planets. So the Enterprise is traveling through galactic space and intergalactic space, and it's involved as an ambassador and guardian of this united federation of planets. Well, this used to be my ideal as a child, right? I was still possessed by the most hopeful inflection of this Promethean ideal of the modern period. I no longer believe that we'll achieve this united federation of planets. Instead, I think we need to have united planet of federations. Okay? So from the united federation of planets to a united planet of federations. I'll just put it. So united federation of planets to a united planet of federations. Or for short, Earth Federation. And what that would look like, who knows, we're in the process of creating it. But it should be presumably guided by the Earth Charter and the social political arrangements we will make on our own. Now, you could break this down into all kinds of other areas, but we don't have time.
Well, Sean, thank you. This is wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you.